Hey, what's going on, everyone? Coach Nicole here, former fat girl, uh, former fat girl turned certified nutrition coach, now living and promoting the low carb lifestyle. I am joined here by Dr. Tony Hampton, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. But how are you doing, Dr. Tony?
I'm having a good day, long day, but no better way to end it than hanging out with a former fat girl. I mean, who knew, right?
Who knew? And we just had an interview before this interview, so we're packing it in, we're getting it going, keeping it moving.
That's right. Getting
Uh,
it in. And
yeah.
by the way, that we're going to release that episode with you on my YouTube channel actually this week. We're going to get it out this week. Yeah, so for those who want to check it out, make sure to go to the YouTube channel and we'll get that out. Actually, the audio only. It'll be this week, and then we'll do the video following week, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. As soon as I get notified, I'll post it in my community tab, and send everyone to your channel. But while we wait for people to come in, there are a couple people in and a couple new channel members I want to highlight here. Let me see if I can get my awesome celebratory soundboard thing working here.
Yeah, I need to make that investment. That sounds like fun.
You do.
That's
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
And Peachy.
That's what I'm talking about. I gotta step up my game. This
I'm
is
telling you,
way above my pay grade. I'm gonna have to work on that.
I'm addicted to the soundboard.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for that. Teach me some things.
I will.
Love
I
it.
will. I'll try not to use it again during this stream. What's up? What's up, Joseph? We got Joseph here. We got Susie here.
Hey, Susie.
Yeah, there's a lot of people looking forward to this conversation, so I'm excited too. B Dog, what's up?
Exercising. That's what I'm
Hey,
talking about. I love it.
on your bike. That's what I call multitasking.
That's right. That's right.
Hey, Renee. Renee's here. How are your cows?
Oh, is she a farmer?
She has cows that sometimes invade her personal space.
Oh,
With
I
yeah,
see. I've seen her many times on my channel, so I got a lot of love for Renee.
he's awesome. What's up, Scuffed Andy from Australia?
Nice.
Got Sean. What's up, Sean? President accounted for.
Yes, yes.
Got Becky. Well, I'm glad you can make it for as long as you're able to. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, we'll work with that.
What's up, Anastasia? Hello,
And
hello.
Anastasia, when I was in Mississippi with my wife doing some work there, Anastasia is family. So we
Oh,
spent a night at their home, and she's a serious cook. She can cook. So looking forward to more meals from Anastasia.
oh, nice. I'm gonna. Does she have a channel?
Not yet, but she
Oh,
should have one.
hey, Anastasia, did you hear that?
Okay, Anastasia, you're on now.
Thank you, Sean, for boosting Tony's channel. So yeah, anyone not subscribed, please do check out his channel. He'll also be at what's up, Low Carb Carnivore. He'll also be at Keto Palooza. So I'm excited to meet
That's
him
right.
in person, live and in person.
That's right. We're gonna do our high five, and we're gonna do it in person. Yes, I can't wait. Can't wait.
So why don't we start, for those who don't know who you are, a little bit about your backstory. We know you're a doctor, but what led you into the medical field, and what type of patients do you typically treat?
Yeah, I've always felt like my personality was perfect for interacting with people. So I transitioned in high school from an architect type career to one focused on people, which medicine was always high on my list. And that's kind of what got me into the medical field. We both attended, me and my wife, Xavier University in New Orleans, which is actually still ranked #1 in the country for getting African Americans into medical school. She's a pharmacist, so they're tops for those two fields. We did that training. Once I graduated, I went into family practice. I became an expert on maternal child health. So for probably the first 15 years of my career or so, I was delivering babies, and then I would take care, that's funny, take care of the babies that I delivered. And then after doing that for 14, 15 years, my wife was like, you know what? You need to come home and take care of me. I'm your baby now. So I had to transition from baby delivering business to more of the adult medicine. So my babies, besides my wife and my kids, are also my seniors. I have a lot of patients, of course, 18 and up, but most of them tend to be older adults. And then as I looked at the landscape, a lot of people were struggling with diabetes and obesity. So I said, you know what? Let's get expert at those two things. And so the diabetes expertise came from my metabolic health focus. And of course, when you think about obesity, I was like, well, what's the best diet for that? And that's when I went from a vegetarian doc to a low carb doc once I recognized that the low carb approach was the most effective way to lose weight. And that's not like my opinion, that's just evidence-based science. And I noticed in my obesity training, although they're not as focused like we are, on low carb, they pretty much admitted that the low carb approach was the best. So that's kind of how I ended up in this space. The pandemic is what led to this crazy YouTube thing and podcasting, because you didn't have as much to do. So you said, well, how do I teach this to somebody who
Yeah.
will listen? Who's going to listen to me, right? And at the end of the day, podcasts and then YouTube. And I'm going to be doing exactly what you're doing, which is why if anybody's from my channel and they haven't subscribed to Nicole's Former Fat Girl channel, please do. She's very straightforward and really on a great journey to support people as a coach and with a lot of nutrition knowledge, which I think is very helpful.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And yeah, so I reached out because as we briefly talked about, most of my clients and the people I work with and I identify with in my previous, former fat girl world, are obese and 50, 60 to 100 plus pounds overweight and struggle with diabetes, largely pre and type 2 is what I deal with. So I figured we can focus a little bit on the obesity and diabetes aspect, because those
Yeah.
are the two epidemics going on right now, and it's a very serious issue. But before we get into some of the questions, if anyone in the chat has questions, please do drop it in the chat with a Q in front of it to make it easy for us to flag. But please do drop questions while you have us both here. Let's take advantage of the doc while we have them on stream. But yeah, drop any questions you have as we get going. But let's start off with, you mentioned in your obesity training that they mentioned low carb. I find that fascinating because in my nutrition training, they're against low carb. Low carb, like a high fat diet, is our emergency system, and it's bad long term. It puts extra strain on our organs and all that stuff. So I'm very fascinated by what you were actually taught in your obesity training when it comes to nutrition. Can you go into that a little bit?
I will start, however, by saying that when I got my master's in nutrition and functional medicine, I had a similar experience that you had, because what I found is that even if they saw evidence that the low carb keto approach, they didn't talk about carnivore, that was way too much, but even when they found evidence that those dietary patterns were more effective, which is what they found, they would always say you can only do it for a little while, because they were still afraid of this, too much meat is going to cause cancer. Saturated fat is going to increase risk for heart disease. It's going to raise your LDL cholesterol. All the things that have been debunked already, they still live in that lane. And even if you go to the University of Western States where I trained, if you look at their brochure, it's basically a plant-based brochure. I mean, everything, there's not one piece of meat on the brochure. So I think that, and I honor that that's the lens they see the world through, but you can't argue with the science. So now when it goes so that's the nutrition and functional medicine, but when it goes to the obesity training, whenever we looked at studies that were showing how effective weight loss was, like one of the studies, I think it was called the SHAI study, SHAI, when they compared like the Atkins diet to the Ornish diet to a standard American diet, and I think they also had the Mediterranean diet in a study, it was clear that the two best diets was Mediterranean and low carb. or Atkins, but the Atkins still beat the Mediterranean diet. But you would never know this, because if you go to US News and World Report, they'll lift up the Mediterranean diet and they will not lift up the keto / low carb Atkins diet, because of those fears that I just mentioned. So now, having said that, so in the training, they always said this is the most effective diet. So they always said that out loud, although they kind of like the Mediterranean also. You know what I mean? So I think you had a mixed bag. But as you talk to people in practice who had that training, I did see a lot of people who were very comfortable with low carb and keto. But they also are comfortable with medication. They also are comfortable with surgery. And even as a conventionally trained doc, I am not anti-surgery. I'm not anti-Ozempic. But when I talk to patients, I say, listen, everything that Ozempic does is what the keto diet does in terms of how it works. And you can do it without the costs, and you can do it without the side effects. And the side effects are pretty pervasive, including it slows your gastric motility. But for some people, your gastric system just stops working. And
There's a lawsuit on that, gastroparesis, and that's irreversible. I just learned about that. Yeah, there is a current lawsuit against Wegovy and Ozempic, and I think a couple other drugs.
And it's coming. There's going to be more, because what's happening is people are so desperate for answers. And if I could just do a once a week shot, why not, right? But the risk, I mean, who would want to risk that? The risk of thyroid cancer and tumors, the risk for pancreatitis, the risk that was discovered in Europe of literally increased suicide and suicide ideation and thoughts. And they're investigating that. So if you have a person who's listening to this and you're like, I really want to try that, but yet I have suicidal thoughts and ideation, or I've been depressed, or I've had anxiety issues, that's probably not a good idea for you. So what I'm saying to people, I'm open to those options, but I don't think that should be your first option when you have an option that is hard to do for some people, but not for most people. And what you need probably is a coach like Nicole to help you when you struggle, because that's the big thing, is when I struggle, is somebody going to be there to hold my hand, to redirect me, to give me grace? Because, I listen to Russ, the homesick Buckeye, and check out his channel too, because I think he's awesome. And he gives himself grace as he left Keto Orlando and stopped by Taco Bell and got some sweet tea and a burrito. He gave himself grace. But the next day, he was back on his, kind of ketovore journey. So I think that, so for me, it's about understanding, who's in front of me, and I meet them where they are. And I never demonize people, just like you, Nicole. And I think that that's the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get to the diabetes aspect, we do have a couple questions.
Yes, let's do it.
For you.
Let's
so
do it.
Becky with Keto Vorgonian, I think I finally pronounced it right. Any experience treating someone with lupus using the low carb diet?
Yes, Dr. Bear, I think is spelled Bair. I got to look that up. But I actually had a podcast with a doctor who was in Chicago, and for a short time, she left Chicago to be with the low carb MD, with Dr. Brian Linskis, and join their kind of group in San Diego. I don't think she's with them now, but she was able to do really well with a carnivore diet. And the reason why that works for things like lupus and autoimmune disease is because there are many different reasons why you end up with an autoimmune disease. But one of the reasons is that the intestinal lining has those tight junctions that keep large proteins and things that shouldn't be absorbed into your body from getting in. The problem is that when that happens, because you're not eating well, you're eating processed foods, sugars, and too many starches and grains, what happens is that you then absorb proteins that you shouldn't. And sometimes those proteins look like you. right? So if those proteins look like you, your body's going to attack the protein. And oh, by the way, since it looks like you, it's going to attack you. And that's when so that's one of the ways you end up with an autoimmune disease. So if you can fix your diet, what'll happen is you fix your gut, and then you can, even if you already have an autoimmune disease like lupus, you'll start to get to the root cause, which we talked about on my podcast with you, Nicole. And when you get to the root cause, you'll start to heal. And at the minimum, you'll put that into remission. So I would strongly advise, we always say this is not medical advice, but we're just telling you what we think is a good idea, right? It's not medical advice, but so I would consider low carb keto. But if you're dealing with an autoimmune, there's a couple of diagnoses that you want to think about, more carnivore-ish and ketovore. And ketovore is kind of like in less than 10 carbs a day. And those are mental illness, anything, depression, schizophrenia, bipolar, things like that. Dr. Amber Hearn is dealing with bipolar and doesn't even take medicines. That's not for everybody, but that's what she's able to do. So mental illness, autoimmune diseases, of course, and anything neurodegenerative, things like seizures, MS, those main categories are the ones that really do well when you start to remove plants. And so I would encourage anybody with an autoimmune disease, including lupus, to give that a try.
Before we get to the next questions, you said something that I kind of want to expand on. So
Yes.
I also focus a lot with seniors, and you did mention some cognitive issues. So when it comes to dementia, and I know there was a video that kind of went viral on the person who had a stroke on the carnivore diet, and a couple vegan YouTubers are kind of jumping at it and reacting to it, right? So when it comes to dementia, Alzheimer's, now dementia is a branch of Alzheimer's, and all that, there's mixed literature out there when it comes to cognitive health. We know that 60-70% of the brain is fat, largely saturated fat, and a percentage of that, and a good percentage of that is cholesterol. So we know that. We know our brain needs glucose to function optimally. So we need glucose and fat. We know that to be true. We know too much glucose can essentially suffocate the brain and damage the brain cells and prevent the release of oxygen into the blood. So we know that to be true. So I guess my question for you is, when you are dealing with cognitive health, since you mentioned it, how do you approach the education when it comes to saturated fat? Because if you just Google dementia and diet, you're going to find a lot of plant-based recommendations out there.
That's right.
And still increasing your saturated fat. So what are your thoughts on that? And how do you educate people? What's your approach?
I basically put the dementia question into the metabolic health bucket. And one of the slides or images I always show people, if you just Google, metabolic syndrome, it'll show an image of a guy with a belly. And then on that image, it'll have, hypertension, diabetes, it'll have cancer, and it'll also have dementia. And then I'll say to that patient, saying, listen, everybody with dementia didn't get it because of poor metabolic health, but most people probably did. So, and the question is, what does that mean for that person? Well, it means that, what led to the poor metabolic health? And when we say metabolic health, guys, we're talking about blood pressure, blood sugar, your triglycerides and HDL that's your cholesterol numbers, and your belly being at the normal levels, right? So if somebody has poor metabolic health, it's probably rooted in hyperinsulinemia. So if they have too much insulin being created by their body, then the question is, why are they doing that? Because we're about the root cause. And what most people will then realize is that, it's the starch, sugar, grains that's causing hyperinsulinemia. Oh, by the way, it's stress. Oh, by the way, it's lack of sleep. So what I tell the patient is, there are certain things in life that we know for sure. One thing we know is that dementia medicines don't work. So you can wait for the next dementia medicine to be, because they're focused on the wrong thing. It's just like cholesterol. You can focus on cholesterol all day, but all that stuff don't work because people who have the most heart attacks have low cholesterol. So what's wrong with this world we live in, right? So I mean, you know what I mean? So what I'm saying to people in front of me, we have a way to at least theoretically reduce the insulin burden because we're not eating the foods, and we're learning about stress, we're correcting our relationships, we're dealing with our emotions, all the things that are important. And if we get that insulin level down and we measure the insulin level as well, then it's a good chance, if you get it in the earlier stages, mild stages, and you could even argue a little bit above the mild stages, that we can start to, at the minimum, stabilize this so it's not progressing. In many cases, it gets better. So why not try that? It's just changing your diet. And so it's my opinion that most people who end up with dementia probably have a metabolic issue. I also tell people, so we're not afraid of fat, because fat is what our brain needs to be healthy. The myelin that surrounds our nerves is made of cholesterol, and fat is the nervous system is all about fat. So our babies, I mean, what do they eat when they're babies?
We're born in ketogenic state when
They're
we're
in
born.
it.
Breast milk is
Preach.
fat.
Fat. So if you're comfortable not killing your baby with that breast milk, then you should be comfortable dealing with that other baby who's that older adult. I call my seniors my babies, right? So that's how I see it. And I think I've seen evidence that it works. I've seen evidence in the science that it works. And until I see anything otherwise, I think that's the best way to go. I do not see any evidence that going in the other direction. In fact, I would argue people who are and I'm not anti-vegan, but I would argue people with those types of dietary pattern, they tend to be depressed and anxious and have more issues because they're not getting enough saturated fat. And I think they're at higher risk. And let's not end up at a nursing home. And you know about this because I know you deal with seniors. Don't go to a nursing home and see what they feed people in a nursing home. It is a disaster. It's mostly starch. And they're sitting there eating the cake. And I mean, they get dessert with every meal. I mean,
and
literally.
soda and juice.
Exactly. And what do you think a senior who's gotten older, whose taste buds are not what they used to be, what do you think they're going to be attracted to?
Oh, yeah.
The spinach and the baked chicken, or the cake and the
Oh,
things
yeah.
like that?
Oh, yeah. We're not
Yes.
gonna talk about that because that's a whole other hot
Yeah,
mess.
I know.
But, Addie brought up a good thing, so I do wanna just touch on this super quick.
Yes, yes, yes.
Dementia Alzheimer's is just type 3 diabetes, it's the same. So, it's not an official classification.
Not
It's
official.
not
Not
officially
official.
type 3 diabetes, it's just what scientists and researchers and medical professionals, what a lot of them are starting to refer to
That's right.
Alzheimer's as, but unfortunately, I wish it were.
And
It's
we
not
can't wait. We
official.
can't wait till we know anecdotally that this is better. So
Yes.
what we do is we measure, okay, we can measure the insulin level is better. Oh, we can measure the C-peptide. We can measure the A1C. We can measure the markers that clog arteries, right? We know that I don't want to get too technical, but apoprotein beta A ratio. We can look at these tests and say, oh, all these cardiovascular risk factors got better. Guess what? Your brain is everything that's a blood vessel in your body, whether it's around your heart or around your brain, that's what leads to these diseases. So if we can fix those blood vessels and increase the production of nitric oxide so your arteries will expand and then they're not stiff, then the circulation to the brain is better. And so those are the things we focus on because we know how to make that better with lifestyle. And we can't wait again until the medicines catch up, because it's a good chance that when they come up with a new medicine, even if it works a little bit, it'll probably have a side effect profile that'll be very scary, just like Ozempic.
Yeah, that's no good. I'm not, I don't want to say I'm anti-medication, but
Yeah.
I refuse blood pressure medication. My doctor was pushing on me. I was like, let me try to drop this because I know it was weight related.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have an issue until I was obese. But yeah, I'm anti-medication unless it's going to save my life. Like I'm all for let's try lifestyle and diet first.
Yeah.
And then if that doesn't work, then let's talk medication. But I'm against medication as a first line of
It
defense.
should not be the first line.
Yeah.
And just so everybody knows that your doctor was trained to make it the first line. Every doctor was taught diet, exercise first, then medicine. But in practice, they don't do the diet and exercise. They don't do the diet and exercise because they weren't trained to do the diet and exercise. If you really look your doctor in the eyes and say, you know, doc, I want you to give me an exercise program, they probably couldn't even give it to you. And if you ask them, hey doc, I need you to give me a dietary program, they probably hand out some handout that they got from the some diabetes association, and on that same handout is going to be stuff you shouldn't be eating,
Like oats.
like oatmeal, and oatmeal is 28 to 30 carbs, which is 7.
But that's
And
diabetic diet approved.
diabetic diet approved. So we have to use a little common sense, guys. And let me just say this. If there's one way to know for sure what's good or bad for you, it's not counting carbs. And I love your approach you talked about earlier, in that you don't necessarily focus on that. You just add the good stuff, right? And that'll crowd out the bad stuff. If there's one way to know what's good for you to eat, all you got to do is trust your old meter, right? Or your continuous glucose monitor. If your meter says that your sugar is high an hour and a half after you eat something, stop eating that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really that simple. And if you do that over the course of 2 to 3 months, you don't even have to count a carb. You'll know what to eat because your meter told you what raises your sugar. And if you eat some spinach, it's not going to go up. If you eat some ribs without barbecue sauce, it's not going to go up. If you eat some rice, it's going up. So you have to just test it, and then you'll know what to eat. And it doesn't really matter what I say. It doesn't matter what my co-host says. It's all about what your meter says, or what your continuous glucose monitor says.
Yeah. It's crazy because like you can have a piece of bread and then have a Snickers bar, and you'll be surprised how close it is with how much it raises your blood sugar.
In most cases, a banana, I was listening
Oh my
to,
gosh.
I don't know if you're familiar with Beat Diabetes, but Dennis Pollock has a channel called Beat Diabetes,
Oh, yeah.
and he does the banana and the Hershey's bar experiment, and the banana always raises it
Oh
more than
yeah.
a Hershey's bar. So fruit is not necessarily your best friend when you're dealing with diabetes. You can get away with the berries, but you need to be very careful.
100%. So Addie said type 2 and type 3 is all metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, chronic cellular inflammation, all caused by what was put into the mouth.
Yes, and
That's
again, we have methods of approaching this, and we think beyond diet, and that's what the nest is. It's exercise also, it's stress and sleep, it's how we think, it's our emotions, and the rope is relationships. I know people who are sick because of who they sleeping next to. We need to either fix that, we gotta get some therapy, or we need to wave bye-bye, like Beyonce said, to the left. You better say it. And organisms and pollutants that harm us, and then the emotions, which you're very familiar with, and our life experiences. So we look at all of those factors and say, where do I have gaps? And we work on those gaps so that we can be healthy.
Yeah. What's up, lambs? Thanks for joining us.
Yes.
All right. So we have other questions here. So Renee, how long has Dr. Tony been carnivore? I have heard his story, but can't remember the time frame. Yeah. So how long have you been carnivore, and what led you to carnivore?
Yeah, people that are crazy like Dr. Ken Berry, Dr. Chafee, Dr. Kiltz, I needed to get permission. So I've been kind of doing this low carb thing probably for nearly 10 years. I kind of moved towards keto probably in the last 2 to 3 years or so. But the carnivore thing's been about a year, a little bit over a year, maybe a year and a half. And for me, it was all about an irritable belly. And I tried to keep eating the plants thinking, okay, this is going to be okay. There's nothing wrong with it. It's got some phytonutrients and all the things we're taught in school. But I just noticed that when I'm not feeling my best, when I'm gassy, it was always with the plants. When I started eating, when I did the experiment, when I saw my fellow influencers doing it, I just noticed that that's when I felt my best. And once I got past the fears of red meat and the fears of saturated fat, and I understood the science, at that point, I said, man, why not just try this for a while? So I kind of did a little bit of an experiment, and I just felt so much better. And the best thing you can do for me is for me not to know I have a stomach, right? I mean, my whole life was focused on, okay, I got to know where the bathrooms are. I know that if I have to do a speech, I got to use the bathroom before I get up there. All that's nonsense. All of that went away. And now I don't know I have a stomach. And it's funny because even with carnivore, it's not just not having stomach problems. I also do really well in terms of just always being full. So if I skip lunch. I eat lunch and dinner. It's like it doesn't phase me. You know, I have to make sure I have plenty of water, but I love not ever thinking about hunger. I mean, for those who are checking this out, could you ever imagine not thinking about food? Like it's not a big deal. And you still enjoy things, just like when I released the video on my YouTube channel about lasagna I just released this morning, focusing on Maria Emmerich's keto lasagna. It was delicious, you know, but I don't think about it. I just eat. I love steak. Ribeye is the best thing I ever eat, but I don't really think about it. I just eat it when it's time to eat. So I just think that for those who haven't experienced this, it's going to be a game changer for you because you'll finally feel like food is, you enjoy it, but it's not the number one priority in your life
I call
anymore.
that food freedom. I call
Yes.
it food freedom. So I used to, so my husband, again, he's not doing what I'm doing. So he has Snickers bars, ice cream, Klondike bars, ice cream, always in the freezer.
Yeah.
Potato chips. If there's ever a zombie apocalypse in the Northern Virginia area, the Malone household is where it's at because we got enough chips and toilet paper to save us all. But the old Nicole used to not be able to look at that stuff, and then my
Yeah.
cravings go through the roof. I didn't have an off switch, but now every time I get ice, I know what's there. I see it, but I don't even think about it. Like I don't even want it. It doesn't bother me one bit, and that's so rare because I used to go to town on those things. But yeah, I call that food freedom. The fact that you can eat things and be fine and not
That's
and
right.
go right back to plan, but you choose not to. Like the choice is
That's
just
right.
not a need anymore. It's just not it's a non-issue. So yeah,
That's
you were
right.
describing food freedom, and that's some of what I promote on my channel.
I love it. And for those who are not carnivore, if you're low carb or keto, again, people like Maria Emmerich, I mean, she got 20 plus cookbooks. And so if you want to, I mean, for like a chaffle is just cheese and eggs, right? So there's plenty of ways to get some of the foods that you liked from the past without feeling like that you have to live without those things. I just choose to keep my life simple. I sometimes will literally make things, literally the lasagna thing that we made recently is really for you guys, because I want to be able to say to my patients, you know what, here are some things you can try. I don't really need it. When my kids are around, we try to do more stuff like that. But for me, I keep it simple and I'm very happy doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm Italian, so you mentioned lasagna.
Ooh,
You're
ooh.
have my heart. You have my heart.
Oh, Lord.
Don't don't tell my husband.
I won't, I won't, I won't, I
Uh,
won't.
so DR question, does black coffee break a fast?
Interesting question, right? So it depends on how, anal you want to be about this, right? So if you're going to be technical, for some people, they would definitely argue that it does, but it's all about what your goals are, right? So for me, I don't drink a lot of coffee, but I kind of use it for when I need it, because again, coffee can irritate your belly too. It's a little bit of a stimulant, and it can cause some leaky gut issues if you overconsume it. Now, having said that, I don't consider breaking coffee a fast if it's black coffee, of course. And some people would even argue if you put some MCT oil in it, things like that is not breaking a fast. But so as long as if your goal is to say, I'm not having insulin spikes, which is mostly what I focus on with my patients, because that's what leads to metabolic conditions like blood pressure, diabetes, etc., then I don't consider it an issue at all. There's nuance to this. Some people want to get to what we call autophagy, where you're really able to, reduce your risk for cancer, remove all the debris out of your body. And the longer you fast, the better you're doing. If you start adding coffee and teas with or without sugar, those things may impact those. But if your goal is just to be metabolically healthy, not have to worry about your blood pressure and diabetes, reduce your risk for dementia. In fact, people with dementia risk should probably put MCT in their coffee, because MCT is one of the supplements I recommend for people who are at risk or concerned about dementia, and also omega-3. You may notice that those are both fats. I
Yep.
recommend fasting for those who can tolerate that. I recommend keto, and then of course exercise, because you got to get the blood to the brain to protect your brain. So I totally think coffee's not a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, if you're talking calories, yeah, I mean, if you just have black coffee, with 0 calories, then
Right.
it doesn't break down
Right.
fast, but it did. But I'm also not like extremely dogmatic or strict either. So I mean, if you want your coffee, I also don't believe in intentionally fasting either,
Yeah,
unless there's a medical reason for it, because one, you fast when you're sleeping and just eat when you're hungry and eat when you're not. If you're hungry and you're going against your hunger because you have a goal of 24 hours for whatever
mhm,
reason, I don't know. I just don't believe in intentionally fasting, because you can throw your hormones out of whack, and that can be a slippery slope, depending on where
yeah,
you are in your journey. But if there's a reason to fast, a medical procedure or whatever, then sure, fast. But I just don't like intentionally fasting, because you're going against your body's signals, and you're going against what your body, and it is a stress on your body. Your cortisol is going to
it
rise,
is.
your blood sugar is going to rise, and because your body wants food and it thinks you're starving it at that point. So yeah, I think if there's no reason to fast, don't fast. Just drink your coffee, eat your food, and
Yeah.
don't stress
And
about
your
it.
body will tell you, and I'm glad you're saying that because you're a woman, and what I found is that women, are the ones who have more trouble with fasting, particularly, the couple of weeks before they have their period, right?
Yes.
So it can, it can cause disruptions in your hormones, and, so I think just be mindful. Some people who like fasting will kinda do it, and then they'll kinda lay off of it a little bit right before
Yeah.
they have their cycle, so I think that's and it's so funny while I'm hearing that on my screen, the Conscious Gynecologist YouTube channel popped up. Dr.
Uh-huh.
Salcido, who, speaks at, the Symposium for Metabolic Health, she lives in San Diego, so that's another YouTube channel, The Conscious Gynecologist. If you're a woman looking for women's health issues, I would really encourage you to check out her channel
Yeah.
because she's just getting started. Probably has less than 500 subscribers, but we're just a big community, guys. We're trying to, that's why I'm so happy that my fellow YouTubers are reaching out. I'm reaching out to them and we're collaborating
Yeah.
because we're trying to grow this community and we want more people to hear this message. So while you're checking us out, make sure you share this with friends and family because they really need this information and they're probably not going to get it from their health systems in our current state. I hope to lead my health system, Advocate Health, in this direction, but it's going to take some time.
Yeah, what was the name of that channel again? The
It's
women's health
called
one?
it's called Conscious Gynecologist. So if
Okay.
they just search that, they'll see it. Her name is Dr. Andrea Salcido, but it's called the
Um,
Conscious.
and
Yeah,
can you drop that in the chat pretty please?
absolutely. Yeah,
Um,
let's do that.
yeah,
Let's put that
so
in the chat.
yeah, she's a mod, so she can drop it in the chat. But
Okay.
I definitely wanna reach out to her because, there is so I have a friend who's a functional nutrition, specialist, so she specializes in hormones and autoimmune, uh,
Hmm.
and I focus on diabetes, emotional, and obesity, so we kind of refer. Um, and she mentioned, and I've been doing some digging into this, it's for women, increasing carbs
Hmm.
a little bit around the menstrual cycle, around that time of the month for hormonal function and increased moods like the tryptophan and all that stuff that can be a mood enhancer to help with the moodiness that we can get because of our hormones. So I do want to do more research on that. I would love to have her on my channel and talk more about women's health and especially kind of like carb cycling
Yeah.
around that time of the month because I'm not extremely smart in that area. I just started looking into it, but that is what I've started digging into just out of
Yeah.
my own curiosity.
Yeah, it's very nuanced, and I think that she would be a perfect person for that. And I think it's a little bit of an experiment because everybody is a little different, but absolutely need to be factored in. So I
Yeah.
love that, nurse. That's perfect. Thank you,
Nurse Cam,
nurse.
we're Keto Palooza partners, so
Oh, okay. So
we're
I'm
gonna
gonna see her too.
see yeah, we're like the Oompa Loompas.
Oh, okay.
You're Tweedledee and Tweedledum. I'm probably the dumb
Okay, cool. Well, you don't sound dumb on your YouTube channel, so I think you're doing pretty good.
So, Nurse Kim, any suggestions? Yeah, yeah, she's struggling with candida. So, any suggestions for Kim? She's fighting chronic candida, and she's been on the carnivore diet for 130 days, doing well, but it keeps rearing its ugly head. So she's been symptomatic, and her doctors are not
Not
providing.
really, they're
Yeah,
not really being helpful.
yeah,
It's a little tricky. So one of the things about this type of dietary pattern is that the types of bacteria, the microbiome in your gut is going to be in your body is going to be different. And so I think the first thing is to understand that your microbiome, even though we're talking about yeast here, is going to impact your yeast. And so everybody's different. Most people who do low carb, keto, or carnivore, they completely get rid of their candida issues, right? But some people don't. So the question is, if you're not the person who's benefiting, should you? I'm not one of those dogmatic persons who believes that it's only, carnivore is going to fix everything, keto is going to fix everything, low carb is going to fix everything. So my advice is to consider, in your particular case, maybe you do need to consider probiotics, which may help you. And if I were to recommend that, I actually did an interview with Natasha Trinev. She is the mother of probiotics with a company called Natren, Natren. I would actually reach out to that company. Now, I did a podcast with her, so I don't have an affiliate, but if you mentioned that you watched the video with me and Natasha Trinev, you'll be able to get a discount. And then you call them and say, if you go online, you'll probably be able to figure it out, but they actually have products specifically targeted for that particular problem. It's the best on the market. They have a gel capsule that protects the probiotics from the organism, from your acid. And every time I refer people to that company versus some of the others, they just do better because it's the company that seems to do it the right way. There's probably others, but in my research, they're like at the top of the pack. So that's what I would do for that, because if the carnivore diet didn't fix it, we need to look at other ways to fix it.
Yeah, thank you for that. She also said, it has definitely helped the carnivore diet, but any small amount of sugar and wham.
Yeah.
And she said she also has an immune deficiency.
Yeah, she got, and again, there you go with the individualized, right? So there may be
Yes.
some other things going on, and that's why you may need some extra support with a probiotic to see if that'll help. That's exactly. I'm not surprised at all with her comments.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that helps, Kim. What's up, JP? JP keeps changing his name. Now he's Keto Cheeto, which I actually liked.
Keto
Stay with that
Cheeto.
one, so I
I
know who
like
you
that's cute.
are. This is
That's cute.
I like it. But just got here wondering about fasting and diabetes. That's a good one. So what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on fasting and diabetes? We kind of talked about this and exercise a little bit during our podcast.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts on that?
It's actually pretty, when you think about what will reverse type 2 diabetes the fastest, right? The two things that come to mind are gastric bypass, which we don't want to do as our first choice. And because you'll revert, because or like a sleeve, when you take away like a part of your stomach, your hunger hormones go away and things just get better literally overnight. Now, having said that, the second best way to reverse diabetes quickly is fasting, because you're giving those islet cells in your pancreas time to rest and recover. And when you do that, and they're still working, there's still life in them, they will absolutely reward you by starting to better produce insulin in a way that's more effective. It'll eliminate the insulin resistance. So I'm a huge fan. Again, it's not required to do that, but if you're a person that's like, I really want to do this very quickly, I would consider fasting. I think Dr. Jason Fung and his clinic, they literally, with the support they do, because you have to be careful when you're not eating and you're taking insulin. You got to be careful. So you want to work with a clinician who understands how to wean you off of medicine. I always refer people to the Symposium for Metabolic Health, website, Low Carb USA website, because they have the guidelines for therapeutic carb restriction. And with those guidelines, it'll give a clinician who's not necessarily trained in metabolic health the information they need to know so that they can wean you off your medicine safely and remind you, oh, by the way, if you have gout or kidney stone history, you need to worry about this. Oh, by the way, if you're having other conditions, like, what do you do with your blood pressure medicine? How fast do you cut down your insulin or your medicine? So it'll kind of walk through those talking points. And so I would literally search that and give that information to your doctor if you're interested in doing this. But fasting is 100% safe to do with some guidance, and it will absolutely reverse type 2 diabetes very quickly. There are a few people who need to, who are not making insulin. They don't know they're a type 1. They've converted. So everybody should get a fasting insulin level to see. So make sure you're not making too much insulin. Everybody should do a C-peptide, because the C-peptide, if it's really low, in the range where you may have converted to a type 1. In that setting, there may be a need to continue things like insulin. So that's what I would do.
Awesome. You did mention gout. I do have a question about gout, but we
Yes.
have the most important question of this stream.
Yes.
You ready for it?
I can handle it.
What came first, the chicken or the egg?
Woo! Man, I like both of them. Let's say that first. Man, okay, that's a tough one. If I had to put my money on it, right?
If you were a
Ooh.
gambling man.
Well, I'm gonna go with the chicken.
The chicken?
Yeah, I know that's a weird answer for some people, but I'm gonna say, because I don't know how the world started, but I'm just gonna say we started with a chicken and then the babies came. So I'm gonna go with the chicken.
So the world started with a chicken bag.
That's what it started
and
with.
then it laid a bunch of eggs. So that's the quote of the stream. Hashtag
That's right. Put that on a tweet.
Put that on the shirt. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
You mentioned gout. So I have a
Yeah.
client who I just started working with who has gout, and when you consult Dr. Google,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
all about limiting the alcohol, foods, largely animal foods, largely meat, because everything has purines, everything has uric acid. So what are your thoughts on the carnivore diet and gout? Because he was put on essentially a
Yeah.
low fat diet. But from what I understand, our body naturally produces uric acid, right? And our bodies can likely produce more uric acid than we'll ever get from meat.
That's right.
And then purines, I'm not smart up on purines, but what are your thoughts on that? And how does a low fat diet affect gout? Because it seems to work with the numbers, but what are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, it's actually a paradox in a way, but it's not a paradox. Chicken bang. It's not a paradox to me. And I when I first started, and the interesting thing about that, like you said, the guidelines for therapeutic carb restriction, they do have a section that talks about gout,
Yes.
and what they recommend is that if you have a history of gout, that it may be helpful to initially be on a medicine like allopurinol. That medicine tells your body not to make uric acid, right? So, because what happens is when you're not keto adaptive or fat adaptive, meaning your body hasn't figured out how to take ketones and use it for fuel. Because if you have a hybrid car, the moment you turn from gas to electric, it just works. But you're a human body, and when you go from burning sugar fuel to fat fuel, it's not going to work that quick. It's going to take a little time to become adaptive to that new fuel. So when you're not adaptive to using ketones, which is breaking down your fat to fuel, what happens is you're going to spill all that ketones in your urine. So people will measure ketones in their urine, looking and see if they're in ketosis. But you can be in ketosis and still not have a lot of ketones in your urine if you're keto adapted, because you're then using it for energy. The problem is you also spill uric acid in your urine, and that's you get rid of uric acid via your urine or via your bowel movements. That's why when people take colchicine, which is the other medicine that helps you get rid of it, when you take a lot of it, it's going to help you get rid of it, right? So at the end of the day, and I do agree that that what this statement says, I do agree with it, that uric acid is the transporter for oxalates, and so if you think about that, right? So if you don't, first of all, once you become keto adaptive, then you will not spill the ketones in your urine. So now you can get rid of uric acid. So the key is, if you're in a keto dietary pattern or carnivore, and you're kind of being fairly consistent with it, and you're not going in and out of ketosis, those people can eat meat with no problem, because it's all about, because what happens is you reduce the inflammation, and when you reduce the inflammation, your production of uric acid is going to go down. And what I find is that when people are in ketosis, whether it's from a carnivore diet or a keto diet, they don't have gout flares anymore. So when you see recommendations that tell you not to eat meat, they're really missing the big picture. Now they base these recommendations on the standard American diet. They assume you're going to stay on the standard American diet, and because you're on the standard American diet, you're still inflamed, you're still making uric acid. And yeah, if you add certain types of foods, it may increase your purine production and leading to uric acid. But when you're on keto or carnivore, you pretty much wash that away. This is one of the reasons why we need more research. Dr. Sean Baker, I know, has raised money for research, because we need to look at people who have a certain dietary pattern and what happens to their body with that pattern. And then we can compare things the right way. Currently, most of the stuff in nutrition, they compare the standard American diet to the other diet. And there's probably, you can't even find a diet that's worse than the standard American diet. So it's going to look good on research. But that does not mean that that's the best diet for everybody. And I don't believe that that's true. So that's how I would approach that. So if somebody's watching this and they have issues with gout or uric acid, kidney stones, you may want to ease into the diet slowly, or maybe have your doctor give you some allopurinol for 2 to 3 weeks while you're becoming keto adaptive. I would also say, if you're doing that and you have a history of gout or uric acid kidney stones, it's probably best not to be, cheating every weekend, because if you do that, you're going to be going in and out of ketosis, and you're going to still be at risk for a gout attack. So if you do the diet right and you get disciplined, and it's a small group of people who really want to do the diet right. People with epilepsy, people with mental illness, people with autoimmune diseases, people with, things like that. But for most people, you can have your moments when you kind of splurge. But if you're dealing with gout, it's probably best to be consistent.
Yeah, so, when it comes to gout, then you're saying it's safe for them to eat meat and all that stuff, because he's gonna have his uric acid levels checked. He
Yeah.
hasn't had any symptoms,
Yeah.
but they can be high and you cannot have symptoms. So that's what I recommended, and I sent him, Dr. Ken Berry's videos. I
Yeah.
think, Anthony Chafee talked about it, and I sent them a bunch of articles to read on it. But I was just curious about your take, because
Yeah.
it's everything you read is
Everything.
stating the exact opposite
But
of.
that's true. But that's also true of so many other
Yeah.
conditions. If you just go to the doctor's office, they're gonna lean Mediterranean, they're gonna lean plant-based, and the doctors don't know. That's the handout that they were given, because those are considered the standards. Even the world news, when they rank diets, they may put Mediterranean as the best diet.
Oh, yeah.
But when it comes to weight loss, they'll still say keto is the best diet, but they still don't want it to be the best diet.
No.
They say it's the best diet for weight loss, but it's
Yeah.
not the best diet. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just ridiculous. It's bias and craziness.
Yeah.
So I don't, if I made my decisions based on those organizations, I would not be in front of you right now. I would still follow the principles that they teach, but the principles they teach are not leading to reversal of disease. So I couldn't stay in that lane. And thankfully I'm in a health system that gives us the privilege of making our own decisions. I know and I know you may want to comment, Nicole. I know in nutrition, they have rules that are different than they have for doctors. And the rules that you have to follow when you're under that umbrella are like, if you start promoting carnivore, they'll probably want to take your license away. It's like, so
Also,
how does that work?
so I will explain the breakdown of the nutrition field. But just to kind of piggyback off what you said about the guidelines. So when we're talking the nutrient recommendations, especially vitamins and minerals, and the reason why we following a low carb carnivore diet, whatever version you're doing of low carb, and we don't get scurvy, is because the RDAs are based off of a high carb.
Right.
So because we don't have that glucose component or as much of a glucose component, depending on how, if you are doing carbs and how much carbs you're doing, what types of carbs, all that stuff. But our bodies are always going to prefer and prioritize glucose first. So if you don't have that glucose interference or that fiber interference,
Yep.
you're going to absorb more nutrients from foods, thereby the RDAs aren't going to be as high. It's because they're taking into account a high carb diet. So I just wanted to piggyback on that because that was a good point you mentioned about the RDAs, that it is based off of a high carb diet, and
That's
going
right.
low carb, you're changing the way we absorb nutrients
That's
and the
right.
way we digest food.
And it'll never be. It's if you find a carnivore that's got scurvy, I'd be surprised because the again the need for the vitamin C is going to be low because most of the vitamin C is in the metabolism of glucose, but you're not really consuming a lot of that, so you don't really need it. And by the way, you get vitamin C from beef and liver
What?
and
I don't have to
others.
eat oranges. I'm just kidding.
Get out of here.
Hey, Rochelle. Good evening, all. As someone who is a pre-diabetic with an A1C of 5.9, how often should I have my A1C checked? My last check was February of this year.
Nice. When we're seeing a traditional patient with diabetes, we may see them every 3 months, and your insurance will only allow you to check it every 3 months. I think it's based on where you are. Now, normal is 5.6 or less. So if it was I would say probably twice a year is enough. But if you're anxious to know, has this dietary pattern impacted me, I would do it more often. You can do it every 3 months based on most insurers. So, and I think right now, while you're on that journey, having that data is so important because you're trying to make sure, am I doing things right? And again, the best way to know you're doing everything right is probably to have a way to measure. Now, I even added a link to my link tree with favorite affiliates, and one is a continuous glucose monitor company, because I think that you want to be clearly aware of what's going to raise your blood sugar. And once you're aware of that, that's going to be your best source of information to help you make decisions. So 3 months is what the insurance say, but 3 to 4 months, as suggested by another viewer, is fine.
Yeah, my clients usually have theirs checked every 3 to 4 months, but
Yep.
they're also type 2. One is pre, but yeah, they get theirs checked every 3 to 4 months
Yep.
until it's reversed. And both of them are actually, one of them is now his average is 80s to 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So we're pretty much there if we can keep it there by his next appointment. But yeah, they get it checked every 3 to 4 months. So yeah, I guess it just depends on your comfort level and what your insurance
And
is.
what you said was important. You said 80s to 90s. People
Yeah,
need to know a normal blood sugar is between 70 to 100.
70 to 100. Yeah.
So don't let people fool you into saying 120, 130. No, it's between 70 to 100. And people who are diabetic say, well, that can't be true because when I'm 80, I don't feel normal. Well,
Yeah.
you're going to start feeling normal once your body adapts to being normal. It's not going to feel normal when you're used to being 200 and 300. Yeah, it's going to feel like you're low, but you have to give your body a chance to
Yeah.
adapt. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so just comfort level.
Yeah.
So I guess the last question, and again, if you guys have questions, I do want to be respectful of the doc's time, but if you have any questions, please do drop it in the chat. I guess my last question for you on the diabetes topic is the American Diabetes Association. I believe that diet and the nursing home, my grandmother died of type 1 diabetes in a nursing home, had legs amputated and all that, and she was being fed a ton of carbs and all that, even as a type 1, and I
Mm-hmm.
believe that contributed to the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to the diabetic diet, the American Diabetes Association. Do you agree with their recommendations if you are even type 1 diabetic, if you're just diabetic? And if not, what do you recommend instead?
Okay. So the recommendations that the American Diabetes Association has out there is that your goal is to have an A1C of 7 or less. Okay. So that's the first thing. And then they also have recommendations. They're not as tightly tied to uh carbs like they used to be, but don't be surprised if they say, about 45 carbs per meal. That's not an uncommon recommendation. So the question is that a logical recommendation? Well, if you eat 45 carbs and you divide that by 4, that's 11 teaspoons of sugar. So you have to be logical about this and say, would it be logical to tell a person who struggles with their blood sugar, and we know that blood sugar, you only have a teaspoon of blood sugar in your blood at any given time, and now you're saying, let's put 11 teaspoons of sugar in it at one time. And the problem with that is that you have to get rid of that sugar, that glucose, because your body considers it toxic when it's that high. Some's going to get stored in your liver and your muscle as glycogen. A lot of it's going to get stored as fat. So if you're trying to lose weight, and more fat you have, the more diabetes you're going to have, because it tends to cause insulin resistance. So I think the recommendation to do 45 carbs per meal is flawed. The other part of that recommendation, if I were to, speak about my wife, who's a type 1 diabetic, how do you match the insulin? Because she has to take insulin with that 45 carbs. And so if you need a unit of insulin, for every 8 carbs or so, or you need one, and by the way, you got to think about protein too. 1 unit of insulin for every 12 grams of protein. That's something that we don't talk about, but that's real too. Then how do you match it, right? It's a guessing game. So you get the number of units you think you need, and it's probably not going to be a match, because I've said this elsewhere. The FDA allows for the labels, if you're eating something in a package, to be off by 20%. So the question is it really 50 something carbs, or is it 30 something carbs? And what'll happen is you're not going to match it very well. So you'll either become hyper or hypoglycemic. Now let's look at a better way of approaching this, where we're not saying 7 is a good A1C, because 7 means your average blood sugar is not between 70 and 100. It means that your average blood sugar is 154, which is eventually going to lead to all the complications of diabetes. It's just going to take longer: kidney failure, blindness, amputations, heart attack, stroke, dementia, cancer, all those things we worry about, right? So what we want to do is, let's take a different approach. Let's think about what's a better meal for a diabetic. And we can go as far as that video I just released today with Maria Emmerich's lasagna, right? Where we replaced the pasta with deli slice chicken breast or turkey. That's all we did. And guess what? You take a 39 carb lasagna down to 4 carbs. Now, I want you to think about my wife again and say, okay, what does my wife have to do with a 4 carb meal now? And she may have some baked chicken, which is 0 carbs, and maybe you factor in some of the protein. So maybe now, instead of taking, whatever, 8 units, 9, 10 units, she just has to take 1 or 2 units. What's the chances that's going to lead to hyperglycemia or hypoglycemia? You may be off, but you're not off by much. And so what's wrong with healthcare in America today is that you go into a hospital and they give you the exact foods that raise your blood sugar. You go into a nursing home and you have dementia on a dementia floor, and they give you the exact foods that cause dementia. So Houston, we have a problem. And unfortunately, you got to come to a freaking YouTube channel to learn this stuff. Why can't you go to your doctor and learn this stuff? Why can't you go to your nutrition professional and learn this stuff? Why can't you go to your pharmacist? Because something's wrong with healthcare in America. So if you see us standing on a roof somewhere yelling and screaming like we crazy, that's because we not crazy. We just trying to make sure everybody wakes up. And you almost have to be your own clinician to and start treating yourself before you start to heal until America wakes up. So it's very frustrating, but I will yell and scream until more people learn this message.
I love that. I love that answer. I've always, because like I said, my grandmother, I don't want to say too much because I'm sure my mom watched a replay because it was her mother. It just did not have a good outcome, and I believe 100% it was because of what they were feeding her in the nursing home as a type 1 diabetic with her legs amputated. Um, so to go back to your question, and Lambs does have a question as well. When it comes to nutrition, the field of nutrition, so registered dietitians are the only nutrition field that is regulated in all 50 states, unfortunately. And they are taught
Mm,
the plant-based diet, right? Lean and
mhm.
green, plant-based diet.
Yeah.
That is what they are taught. Based on religion, I'm pretty sure most of us know that by now, but that is the only field in nutrition that is regulated in all 50 states. That is also the only field in nutrition who has to follow the guidelines by law and licensure,
Mhm.
or like Michelle Hearn, and there are others who will lose their license and lose the RD designation if they go low carb or promote keto or something
Mhm.
that's not plant based. Um, when it comes to the term nutritionist, that is not regulated in all 50 states. It's regulated in most states. And so, for instance, in the state of Virginia, my state, my current state, I legally cannot call myself a nutritionist because I don't have a bachelor's degree in food science or nutrition science. I'm not board certified and I don't have a license. That is a requirement here. However, if I move to Florida, I can call myself a nutritionist. A personal trainer can call
Mhm.
themselves a nutritionist. It's not regulated.
Oh,
So you
wow.
just have to check the
Mhm.
regulations in your state. It just happens to be my current state. It's regulated, which I agree with. So my technical designation, depending on what certification I wanna use, I just call myself a certified nutrition specialist because I hold multiple certifications
Mhm.
and credentials, but I am educated. I also have to do, CEUs and maintain each of my credentials every 2 years, so I have to certified, meaning I have to sit for the exam,
Mhm.
for each, certification I hold every 2 years. So that's the difference, is that I can promote low carb, I can promote whatever I want. I'm taught the same things registered
Mhm.
dietitians are taught as far as the guidelines and all that, but I'm not bound by licensure and
Mhm.
all that to promote what I'm taught. I That's why I'm able to promote low carb and all that and still be certified and all that, but registered dietitians would not be able to do what I'm doing.
That's good to know, and I do think that's a better model where you you give people information. And what I think I learned in nutrition school that was the most important, I had a chance to review biochemistry and things like that. But more importantly, I was able to learn how to read research studies. I mean, I had an entire class
Oh, that's
dedicated to reading research studies so that now when I hear a headline and it says meat's going to kill me, the first thing I ask are certain questions. So, what was the quality of the study? Was it randomized controlled trial? Who sponsored the study? So you ask those questions, and then you'll at least know what the bias is. But if it's really just a observational study where you're just doing surveys and looking at data as opposed to a real experiment, I already know that the level of evidence is not enough for me to change my clinical decision making. And our job is to support you, whether you're in front of me as a patient or hearing us on YouTube or elsewhere, so that you can say, man, maybe I need to understand the quality of this study. And if you don't understand it, you want to have a clinician you can partner with and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Here's a study. Is this a quality study? Can I trust it? Was this real research or was it something that people just responded to a survey to? And I think the better you get at that, and to be honest with you, there's always people out there commenting on studies, giving feedback, and people like Dr. Eric Westman, for example. These are fairly reliable. You have to be careful who you listen to, but you want to listen to people who really put evidence in front of you as they share this message of healing. And we are just so thrilled that people come to this audience and listen in and chime in, because it's not just you that's changing, it's the people you love, it's the people who know you, and it's going to make a huge difference. And that's what I love about this. There are people I'll never meet, and I'm sorry. That is funny.
I was
Yeah,
gonna
we
comment on that because you were talking studies. I was like, most of them are epidemiology, because it's like my clients reporting to me in their food journal what they're eating, and I give my recommendation of what they're eating, because it's illegal to lock humans in a lab. I'm pretty sure that's kidnapping and entrapment, and there's laws against that. So you're not gonna have human clinical trials, because you're not gonna lock humans in a lab for their entire life or most of their life.
right.
Legal. That's kidnapping in most states, if not all 50 states, I'm pretty sure.
That's right. That's
So
right.
so
That's
yeah,
right.
so whenever it says clinical study or clinical trial, whatever, I automatically just laugh, because I know it's not on humans, and if it is on humans, then it's not a clinical trial.
That's right. And it's hard to do clinical trials because we are not mice, and so that's what complicates things. And that's why when I spoke at the Symposium for Metabolic Health and I talked about how vegans and carnivores can live in harmony,
Yes,
I talked about it's all about the experiment N of one. And I kind of concluded by saying something cute, like, if you see me talking to myself, I'm just getting expert advice, right? So I talk to myself a lot, but I only do that after I gather information. And I may be triggered by something I read. I may be triggered by listening to people I respect, like Dr. Eric Westman and others. And then I trust but verify. Even the people I love and respect, I trust but verify, because they're just people, and people have bias. People are trying to sell stuff. So you want to make sure you pause for a moment and do that as well.
absolutely. So this will be the last question of the night, and it is from Lambs. I took a course in gynecology for you what youth
Oh,
NC. Oh my god,
enthusiast,
I
enthusiast.
I saw a U for
Yeah,
whatever.
I know, enthusiast.
But I almost choked on my oral exam. Could carnivore help? Sorry, it's late out here. I'll get my coat.
Ah, that's funny. Let me tell you, first of all, I appreciate you doing that, because I think the level of information you're gonna get is amazing. People who are in the gynecological profession, just so people know, it's a little tougher when I have to sit down in front of the computer and spend several hours doing my board certification. But for gyne, and sometimes some of the surgical specialties, they have to do oral exams. They get in front of people and have to prove that they know what they're doing. So that's crazy. So, but so I think carnivore helps everything for the most part. So if you're asking, is carnivore helpful for gynecological conditions, like our Conscious Gynecologist YouTube channel is going to teach us? The answer is yes. Does everybody need to be carnivore? No. I thrive as a carnivore. That does not mean that I'm not ketovore some days. Of course, I have my moments, but I just thrive. So I think you listen to your body, you do an elimination diet, get as close to carnivore as possible, and then you add things back if that's what you want to do. Some people just like certain things, right? And if you add things back in your body after 2 to 3 days, doesn't look at you funny and gives you symptoms. And the functional medicine folk, they have elimination diet like guidelines. So if you look at if you just search functional medicine approach to elimination diet, you'll see a very thorough PDF that'll explain it. And that's what I would do. But I don't want anybody who's checking us out, even though we're carnivore, that you have to do that. We just want you to get rid of the sugar and the starch and the grains and all of that processed food. If you do, and the seed oils, if you get rid of that, you're going to be on your way. And as Nicole would say, let's add the good stuff back. If you've stayed away from beef because you thought it was causing heart disease and other stuff, you can come on back home, because it does not. And we have plenty of evidence to say that that's not a problem for cancer and saturated fat, etc. And I just think that your body will reward you. And I see people really do well when they I call it coming back home.
Yeah.
And be and I love when I was out in Mississippi checking out those cows with Anastasia and her husband Don. And I did make a video, by the way, that'll come out in a week or so where I share that, just talking about regenerative farming. But I'm gonna tell you something. I honor those animals because I noticed that the mama cow was making sure it didn't get close to the baby cow. I mean, these creatures are amazing. They're just like us. We just live in a world where in order to have life, there must be death. And we have to be okay with that. It's okay, but we're going to give them the best life possible while they're here, and then we're going to honor them. And I after learning about how I should honor animals, we do sit in front of our meals now, and we may honor them in a way that we hadn't in the past, and we want to do that as well. In fact, I find that hunters, people who do that type of stuff, they're actually honoring the animals more than the people that don't want you to eat the animals. It's very ironic. Yeah.
Well, I definitely want to thank you for taking your time and sharing your wisdom. I know I learned a lot. I was excited to chat with you, especially about the diabetes, and we actually got into other topics that were pertinent to
Yes.
clients as well, based off people in the chat's questions. So I definitely learned a lot. So before we end and say goodnight, do you have any final messages or thoughts that you want to share with us before we call it a night?
Yeah, I think the thing that comes to mind is the grassroots nature of what we do. And that's why when I had an opportunity to share other people's channels, I took advantage of that because we have people out here. And if does anybody really know how busy a OB-GYN doctor is? You don't want to know. It's so for people to take the time to share messages of healing and just be in that space where we're teaching. It's just a beautiful thing. So I just want everybody to know that you have a lot of opportunities to help spread this message yourself. So in fact, I've encouraged people, like I have a link tree, Dr. Tony Hampton link tree. Everybody should think about getting a link tree because you can get it for free. And if you get a link tree and you don't make videos, that's okay. Share somebody else's video. Share
Oh.
somebody else's research study and just put it in your link tree. And that way you'll be helping friends and family and others who you share it with spread this healing message. Because again, this is a grassroots effort. It's going to take all hands on deck in order for us to make the improvements we want to see. So I really appreciate what you're doing, Nicole. I was so happy to discover you and be on your channel. Very intelligent. All those certifications are not to put on your shelf or on your wall. When you listen to Nicole, you can tell that she's taking the time to learn some things that we need to learn. So you don't have to learn all on your own. You just need to have people on your team who can help spread this message.
I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to meeting you in person in Keto Palooza.
Yes.
It's my birthday weekend too. That's
Ooh,
gonna
we're
be
gonna
fun.
party. We're gonna have us a good time.
43. I don't know. That's not a milestone, but I'll take it.
It's a good number though. It's a
It's a
good
good
number.
number.
That's right. Okay.
But thank you so much again for chatting with us tonight, and thank you to everyone in the chat for spending your evening or morning wherever you are in the world with us.
That's right.
Again, if you haven't given this video a thumbs up with whoever channel you're watching, please do drop a thumbs up. It really spread the video further. And if you're not subscribed to me, I would appreciate a sub. And if you're not subscribed, if you're from my channel and aren't subscribed to Dr. Tony, please do drop him a sub as well. And let's support each other and help the community grow.
All
But
right.
thank you again. Until next time, have a good night, everyone. Have
Take
a
care,
happy and healthy
guys.
day.
Be good.